Warcraft 3 Reforged. A game that was full of promise. Promise that would breathe new life and players into the game through new graphics and modern improvements. Unfortunately, this promise was stunted by the disastrous release of Reforged. While there are many questions about what happened, like what went wrong, why did people get so angry, what was wrong with the game, and crucially, did Deathrock eat all of the science team's donuts? But I believe the most important question is legal in nature. It's about Blizzard's conduct. Were the statements and promises they made about Reforged deceptive? Furthermore, what can you do about it now, or the next time you see potentially deceptive advertising for a game? Hello there. My name is Alad Botwin. I am a lawyer and author of a law review article that directly relates to issues like this. It is titled Deception Unknown, a hard look at deceptive trade practices in the video game industry. I will post a link to my article below. My screen name is Sir Goodness in most places. I may as well say it now since it will probably come out eventually. To be clear, this video is not about what went wrong or what is wrong with Reforged. It's a legal analysis that seeks to answer whether or not Blizzard was deceptive in advertising Reforged. More importantly, this video is here to educate a little about deceptive trade practices law and what you can do when you see advertising that appears to be deceptive. This video will have a few parts. I'll start with the story of Reforged. After that, I'll examine what Blizzard did say and did not say, and compare it to what is actually in Warcraft Reforged. Following that comes the most fun part, a little bit about deceptive trade practices law in the United States. From there will be the final part where I actually answer the question that this video is all about. I will give my legal opinion on whether Blizzard engaged in deceptive advertising under the rules and laws enforced by the Federal Trade Commission and federal courts. Then, I'll tell you about what you can do as a consumer, timestamps included. I assume that not everyone is knowledgeable about Warcraft 3, Reforged, or even the real-time strategy genre, so let's take a step back, way back to the early 1990s. Specifically, 1992 with Dune 2 by Westwood Studios, the first modern RTS game. It introduced a combination of features that almost all real-time strategy games use, like the user interface, resource gathering, base building, technology upgrades, and unique factions that you can play as. Blizzard jumped into the nascent RTS scene with Warcraft, Orcs and Humans, in 1994. This was the first RTS I ever played. Also, one of the first grown-up computer games I played. That and trying to figure out how to fly in A10 with a keyboard. It was the archaic cinematics, the carnage of cool orcs clashing with humans, and the pandemonium of catapults lobbing giant fireballs and plastering people that roped me into the world of Warcraft. But I digress. While Dune 2 was a success, Westwood started its own iconic series in 1995, Command and Conquer. Westwood put out two Command and Conquer titles in that year, the eponymous Command and Conquer, commonly known as Tiberian Dawn, and its prequel, Command and Conquer: Red Alert. Later the same year, Blizzard followed with a Warcraft sequel, Warcraft 2. Soon, Microsoft joined in the fray with Ensemble's Age of Empires in 1997. While many other companies took a stab at the real-time strategy genre with varying degrees of success, the big dogs of RTS were Westwood, later acquired by EA, Microsoft, and Blizzard. All of these companies were yet to produce their greatest RTS titles. Fast forward to 2002, and Blizzard made its first foray into a fully 3D real-time strategy game with Warcraft 3. Blizzard would ride on Warcraft 3's success and change the gaming world forever with World of Warcraft, which really was a phenomenon back in the 2000s. It still is a household name, spawned one of the first widespread memes.
Alright, chums up. Ready, guys? Let's do this. Leroy Jenkins!
And had memorable commercials.
I'm Mr. T, and this is my night elf mohawk.
Cut, T, there's no such thing as a night elf mohawk.
Shut up, fool!
On the other end, the custom Warcraft 3 map, Defense of the Ancients, Dota, led to the development of two gaming juggernauts, the MOBA games League of Legends and Dota 2. In recent years, remastering or remaking old classics has become a fairly popular trend in the video game industry. This trend has also permeated into the RTS genre. Each of the big dogs of RTS have put out remasters recently. Microsoft has been remastering the Age of Empires series, with Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition as its latest and greatest release. EA has delivered the Command & Conquer Remaster Collection, which has also proven to be a resounding success. Then, there's the black sheep of the bunch, Blizzard with Warcraft 3 Reforged. It was announced at BlizzCon 2018, BlizzCon being Blizzard's annual public convention. Blizzard had a respectable amount of material to show off. This remaster of Warcraft 3 looked promising, and many fans of Warcraft 3 were excited about this reforging. The idea of playing a beloved game with a brand new coat of paint and under-the-hood improvements was a majestic thought. Blizzard stated that Reforged would release in 2019. This appeared to be convincing, as Blizzard had a full demo level available to play at BlizzCon, complete with new cutscenes, graphics, user interface, and other features. Unfortunately, red flags started to arise as most of 2019 was marred by radio silence from Blizzard. As the months of 2019 cycled on toward 2020, there was no new news. People started wondering if Reforged would even be released in 2019. Finally, new information was disseminated in November at BlizzCon 2019. Blizzard reiterated that Reforged would still be released in 2019. The open beta for the game was released shortly afterward. At this point, some became pessimistic from the announcements at BlizzCon 2019 and the state of the game seen in the beta. Others were still optimistic that things would turn out fine. As the weeks rolled on toward a less than auspicious new year, Blizzard announced that it would delay the release of Reforged to the next year, specifically January 28th, 2020. When Warcraft 3 Reforged was finally released on that day, the situation rapidly spiraled from tenuous to disastrous. Player outrage mushroomed amid a myriad of technical issues, as well as complaints about the overall quality of Reforged and the new graphics. On top of that, players complained about missing features, including both new features promoted by Blizzard and old features that were formerly in Warcraft 3. Many people were angered by Blizzard's conduct and expressed their frustration on the internet. As of the making of this video, it has been about 7 months since this debacle. The outrage has dissipated, but there continues to be an air of disappointment. Blizzard has applied intermittent updates to Reforged since release. While there have been technical fixes and rebalancing the gameplay, there has been very little progress on the front of restoring missing features and adding promised ones. So far, Blizzard has acknowledged that certain features are missing, and that the developers are working on delivering those features to the game. Most recently, the Reforged team has reported on a major update that will be released within the next few months. This update is slated to finally implement player profiles and ranked ladder for online play. One feature that has been delivered on already is the restoration of the single-player mode. Now it's time for the deep dive, pun probably intended, into what Blizzard said in the time leading up to the release of Reforged. By the way, as seen in the law I'll discuss later, representations, claims, promises, statements, they are all different words for the same thing. In this case, stuff that Blizzard said about Reforged. There's also omissions, in our case, things that they didn't say, but probably should have said. Before I go further, let's do some organizing for all this stuff. Otherwise, it'll be an indecipherable jambalaya of words that would make the Enigma machine blush. The first thing is that the representations were mostly made in three places: at BlizzCon 2018, BlizzCon 2019, and on the official Warcraft 3 website. The relevant interviews and reports about Reforged were right around the time of the BlizzCons, if not held during one of the BlizzCons. Another thing to note is that BlizzCon 2019 was partially pay to watch. What I mean is that some events at BlizzCon 2019, including the one for Reforged, were exclusive. You would have to buy a $50 virtual ticket to watch it. Sure, the ticket gave you a bunch of other goodies, but it's still a pretty steep price to pay if you were only interested in news for a single game like Reforged. Fortunately, the Reforged event at BlizzCon 2019 is available to watch on YouTube. The other thing to organize are the advertised features in question. So, we're talking about the in-game UI, the World of Warcraft retcons, the cinematics, the cutscenes, new hero skins for multiplayer games, and the preservation of existing features from Warcraft 3, like ladder, clans, profiles, and automated tournaments. Without further ado, let's talk about these features. Let's start with the new UI Blizzard showed at BlizzCon 2018. It was featured for a moment in the first Reforged trailer that was released. On top of that, it was fully functional in the calling demo that people got to play at BlizzCon 2018. Blizzard also said that players would be able to switch back and forth between the old and new UI as they please. Fast forward to BlizzCon 2019, Blizzard says nothing specifically about that new UI they showed off the previous year. However, Back to Warcraft, which casts competitive Warcraft 3 matches and reports Warcraft 3 news, reported that only the old UI layout from the original game would be available at launch, meaning that the new UI would not show up as initially promised, at least not immediately with Reforged going live. Meanwhile, the official website promoted, and still promotes, an updated UI. Indeed, the menu and old in-game UI were updated. However, Reforged does not have that new UI that was shown at BlizzCon 2018, and the Reforged patch notes and news thus far say nothing about that new UI. Next up are the World of Warcraft retcons. At BlizzCon 2018, Blizzard announced that Reforged would be retconned in a few significant ways, so certain characters like Jaina and Sylvanas would get more time in the limelight, and that the Warcraft 3 story would better line up with the World of Warcraft lore. After all, World of Warcraft is the canonical sequel to Warcraft 3. When BlizzCon 2019 came around, this tune changed. Polygon held an interview with Blizzard executive producer and vice president Robert Bridenbecker, who stated that Blizzard decided to leave the Warcraft 3 story as is and back away from the retcon plan. The official website also reflected that decision, as it promoted, and still promotes, only the ability to play the original campaign missions with the new graphics of Reforged. On to cinematics. This is separate from the cutscenes, which are rendered in-game. The cinematics are pre-rendered. Blizzard showed off a new pre-rendered cinematic at BlizzCon 2018. This cinematic was a remake of the one that plays when you open Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos for the first time. It features noticeable changes that would make it distinct from the original cinematic. At BlizzCon 2019, Blizzard stated that it would be improving the quality and resolution of the original pre-rendered cinematics for Reforged, explaining that it had found the original cinematic renders at high resolution. This meant that only the new cinematics shown at BlizzCon 2018 would be remade, while the others were simply upscaled to high resolution. The cinematics are indeed this way in the released game, and therefore Blizzard's statements about the cinematics were not misleading. Now for cutscenes. This one is a doozy. At BlizzCon 2018, Blizzard showed new in-game cutscenes which were part of the calling demo mission. most notably, a remake of the opening cutscene of the Calling that is pivotal to the Warcraft 3 story. This is the cutscene where Prince Arthas starts down his dark path, deciding to purge the citizens of Stratholme rather than let them succumb to the plague that will turn them into the undead. Blizzard also created a Calling campaign trailer, which used footage of the demo mission and cutscene. The Calling cutscene featured a style very much distinct from the original in-game cutscenes, with a more cinematic atmosphere, unique animations, and generally a higher production value. However, when Reforged released, this cutscene was very different. Here's a juxtaposition of the BlizzCon 2018 cutscene and the release version.
Glad you could make it, Uther.
Watch your tone with me, boy. You may be the prince, but I'm still your superior as a paladin.
As if I could forget. Listen, Uther. There's something about the plague you should know. Oh no. We're too late. These people have all been infected. They may look fine now, but it's just a matter of time before they turn into the undead. This entire city must be purged.
What? How can you even consider that? There's got to be some other way.
Damn it, Uther. As your future king, I order you to purge this city.
You are not my king yet, boy. Nor would I obey that command even if you were.
Then I must consider this an act of treason.
Treason? Have you lost your mind, Arthas?
Have I? Lord Uther, by my right of succession and the sovereignty of my crown, I hereby relieve you of your command and suspend your paladins from service.
Arthas, you can't just...
It's done. Those of you who have the will to save this land, follow me. The rest of you, get out of my sight.
In Blizzard's defense, they did make statements about the cutscenes at BlizzCon 2019. Here, it was stated that the Reforged team decided to dial it back a bit in regard to the cutscene style presented at BlizzCon 2018. Here, I'll play the full quote.
Let's talk about the campaign. In terms of the campaign, is there still a vision that you want to reimagine some of the story arcs? Are you focusing on just making it look the best it possibly can? What's been the development on that?
Yeah, last year, as you saw with the Calling, we were really aggressive on some change, I think, and telling the story from a different perspective, and we got what we thought was, fairly divisive feedback of the camp of like, don't change my game versus like, oh, this is cool, it'll welcome a new audience. And then we went back to the shop, and as we were iterating, we weren't happy where we were going with that kind of culling treatment as it became talked about in the office, and we decided to dial it back a bit. So all of the cameras have been reworked. As we've been talking about, all of the models are new, and there's tons of new animations, gestures, and things that make them seem more real.
And Arthas not doing a spell every time whenever he wants to make an action.
As you may have noticed, there was no express statement that the BlizzCon 2018 Calling cutscene would not be present in the released game. There was only this statement that the Reforged team would take a more faithful approach to the cutscenes. These statements made on stage at BlizzCon 2019 were also echoed during a Back to Warcraft interview with Reforged developers. Here's the relevant clip.
Will we see any changes to the Warcraft 3 campaign mode?
Yeah, like Ko was mentioning, where we were kind of seaming together the WoW aesthetics of what has been developed and what has been in Warcraft 3. We're bringing together Dalaran. We're making sure that it looks like Dalaran in WoW. We're also making sure that Stratholme looks like Stratholme, as well as Silvermoon. So there are aesthetics and buildings that we actually are adding to the game to kind of bring the WoW community's familiarity to Warcraft 3, but also give a new life to what is Warcraft 3 in the campaign. We're doing new cutscene camera angles and stuff like that. So we have the tools to have slow-ins and slow-outs now instead of the linear motions, but we're kind of maintaining close to what the original one was, so people get that same aesthetic feel that they had when they originally played it, but with new nice visuals and particle effects. And we also have cinematic animations now where characters will walk instead of run. They'll have gestures. They'll actually point their weapons and stuff like that instead of like Arthas constantly using his spell to like announce everything that he does, lifting his hammer up. Now he actually gestures to Uther and stuff like that. So there's a lot of fleshing out what was in Warcraft 3 to what we have now in the campaign.
Yeah, as we did that, though, we did the dialogue, the story, everything. We made sure we kept that intact because that's the part that I think is so iconic and such a kind of this foundational thing to Warcraft lore that we wanted to hang on to and make sure people could experience it again with just new visuals and just new aesthetic and new technology while maintaining like the core of what you expect from Warcraft 3.
And that's the thing, the voiceover, we're leaving it as it is. We did listen to feedback last year on the BlizzCon. We did hear people's response to how Arthas was differently voiced from WoW and all that stuff. So we said, you know what, let's not change that. Let's not sever that connection that people have from the original voices in the game so that when they are listening to Arthas, it's the original Arthas that they know, they love, and all that stuff.
On the other hand, at the end of the BlizzCon 2019 event where these statements were made, Blizzard teased a new cutscene that, like the calling cutscene, had a cinematic style unique from the original. Here's the teaser.
We know many of you are actually here for cinematics, more so than you are, cinematics and campaign than you are for multiplayer. So we wanted to give you a little sneak peek of, it might not be in the beta, but it's probably worth showing up for later on. Yeah.
Do we want to talk about that?
Yeah, get hyped. That's this guy right here.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah.
It's a remake of the Arthas vs. Illidan fight cutscene from the Frozen Throne. While the remake is a pre-rendered cinematic, the original was more like an in-game cutscene. But here's the problem with Blizzard's statements at BlizzCon 2019. Teasing a cutscene that clearly appears different, like the calling cutscene, after announcing the change in artistic style to be faithful to the original cutscenes, is grounds for confusion. I think it is difficult to show that Blizzard effectively disclaimed the calling cutscene and the overall style of it, as it did with canceling the World of Warcraft retcons. The Arthas vs. Illidan teaser, even with what little it showed, was indicative of an approach less conservative than what Blizzard was claiming to do in place of the calling treatment. Finally, on the official website, Blizzard claims that there are over 4 hours of Reforged cutscenes. Currently, this claim is positioned next to videos of 2 in-game cutscenes, giving a perfectly accurate impression of what the Reforged cutscenes are like. Meanwhile, the calling campaign trailer is located in a separate section of the website entitled BlizzCon Video Archives. The elements represented in the trailer and the full cutscene from the BlizzCon 2018 calling demo do not appear in Reforged. Instead, players are treated to a cutscene in a style more similar to the original. But the presentation on the website was not always this way. In the past, the calling trailer was prominently featured next to the cutscene claim I mentioned above. This trailer was presented like this before release, during release, and for about a whole week after release. Non-US localizations of the website continue to feature the calling cutscene for almost 2 weeks after release, until they were also updated to show the in-game cutscenes instead. On Blizzard news articles linked to the official Warcraft 3 website, Blizzard consistently stated that there will be multiple hero skins for each hero in Melee games, as opposed to the original game where there was only one model per hero. If you're wondering what Melee means in this context, it does not refer to driving closer and hitting people with your sword. It refers to standard games without custom elements. Blizzard also claimed that heroes from the campaign would be available as skins for Melee games. Heroes like Arthas, Jaina, Sylvanas, Grom Hellscream, and most importantly, Chonk Lord. However, there are only 6 hero models currently available. 2 of them are the female Demon Hunter and female Death Knight, which are available to all who purchase Reforged. The other 4 models are exclusive to the Spoils of War edition of the game, which costs $39.99, $10 more than the $29.99 base price of Reforged. None of the other promised hero skins have been added. In Grubby's BlizzCon 2018 interview with Reforged senior producer Pete Stillwell, Grubby, a professional Warcraft 3 player, asked about the fate of existing multiplayer features from Warcraft 3 in Reforged. Stillwell promised that the development team would preserve or merge those features with the Reforged multiplayer elements. Here's the clip.
Legacy features that Warcraft 3 has had, I call them legacy features now, but they're currently in the game, they exist, that may not be part of some other Blizzard games, such as the ability to create clans, put information in your profile, or even the stats that we have attached to Warcraft 3 accounts that are currently existing, with the icons that are associated with it. Are these things usable in Reforged once Reforged hits a new Battle.net alliance, with the new launcher, the new client of Battle.net?
Yeah, similar as we did with StarCraft Remastered, you'll be able to kind of merge your legacy account with your modern one and thus retain that artifact of your games played and won or lost or what have you. And then for clans and things of that nature, similarly, we'll heal up, the back end differences essentially to still empower you having clans, and we'll be using groups, which Battle.net has implemented recently. And the real power there is that even when you leave, then the Warcraft 3 client, you should still be able to talk to that clan, which I think is awesome. Like, you can stay connected, even if you were playing another game or
on mobile,
yeah,
or
exactly,
while the launcher is open and you're playing another game.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, so
Very
I think
nice.
that's really great, because if one of your buddies is like, "Hey, I got a game open, hop in the lobby," you don't you'll see that risen up and be able to click to join or what have you.
Sure.
Yeah.
The following year, at BlizzCon 2019, Grubby posed a similar question to Stillwell. I'm going to just play the clip to avoid any confusion on my part.
Now, Warcraft 3 will be on the new Battle.net, but there were some features that existed before the new Battle.net was merged with Reforged. For example, the clan system, the profile system, chat system. When it comes to the UI of both the menu system as well as in-game, how has development been on that? Are there any special plans that you can talk about?
Sure. So we scripted this heavily, guys, obviously. From the menu systems, as you can see, they're reminiscent, they're thematic. The sounds of the chains going up and down, those things that we know and love from the game, we're maintaining. The arranged teams and Battle.net chat and some of these other things that are now hybridized, we're going to continue to improve upon.
At BlizzCon 2019, Stillwell also said that players would have everything in their hands from an online perspective, including multiplayer and custom maps.
By the end of the beta, you'll have everything in your hands from an online perspective. So everything multiplayer, everything custom map. So we're super excited about that.
As I have already mentioned, many of the multiplayer and competitive features such as ladders, clans, profiles, and automated tournaments were completely removed with the release of Reforged. There is more that was stated, particularly about ladder. In response to a question about potential changes in competitive ranking and progression at the panel, it was mentioned that those aspects would be looked into for when ladder comes in line with the first major update. It was just nonchalantly mentioned. Watch here.
Can we also expect changes in how the ranking works and maybe how wins or progression system works in Reforged?
So that's one of the things we're looking into for when Ladder comes online with our first major update, is what does that look like for Warcraft 3 Reforged? We do know that we're doing the separate race MMR, and there will be different ratings for the team games as well. So you have different ratings for your like 2 versus 2 teams, 3s, free-for-all, which is one I'm excited for. I really like free-for-all personally, so I'm excited that we're going to get a lot of new players into that. But we'll be seeing it going forward.
Okay, more information to come.
It should be noted that some fan summaries of the announcements at BlizzCon 2019 determined that Ladder would still appear at release. Conversely, Back to Warcraft reported that ranked ladder would not be in the game at initial release. Back to Warcraft's information was based on information direct from Blizzard, including an interview held with the Reforged developers, where they expressly stated that the ladder won't be live at first, and will be brought back online shortly after launch. As of the making of this video, there is officially no ladder in the game. I say officially because there is a community-made ladder, w3champions.com, which was created by a guy who works as a software engineer for BMW. Meanwhile, the Reforged developers have given progress updates on adding ladder and player profiles. In addition to Blizzard's representations, there were omissions about 2 significant features, single player and custom campaigns. Again, omissions are for important information that consumers should be informed about, but a company fails to provide such information. Single player is an important part of Warcraft 3. This holds true for most other real-time strategy games. I can't think of any RTS games off the top of my head, at least ones contemporary to Warcraft 3, that didn't have single player. Warcraft 3's single-player mode allows players to play on any official or custom maps they have, fight with and against the AI, pause the game at their leisure, and enter cheat codes, which can also be entered in the campaign. Blizzard made no representations about single-player before Reforged was released. However, it would be reasonable to assume that single-player would be expected to be present as Reforged was sold as a Warcraft 3 remaster. Single player was disabled at launch. The only apparent alternative was to play a game through local area network, which operates like an online game and deprives players of being able to pause the game and enter cheat codes. On the bright side, single player now works in Reforged. On April 28, 2020, 3 months after release, Blizzard re-enabled single player with patch 1.32.5 of Reforged. Custom campaigns allow players to make their own campaigns using the basic infrastructure used for the original campaigns. They can be anything that players could imagine, from modifications of the original campaign, alternate scenarios, fan remakes of other games such as Warcraft 3's predecessors, and fully original adventures, or pure masterpieces.
I can't believe my eyes! It's a half-orc!
Size.
As with single player, Blizzard did not say anything specific about custom campaigns prior to the release of Reforged. When Reforged released, custom campaigns were unavailable. There is an inconvenient way around this. Individual custom campaign levels can be played using the playtest feature in the Warcraft 3 map editor. Since release, Blizzard has stated that it is prioritizing on delivering custom campaigns along with other missing features. Now, it's time to look at the law on deceptive trade practices so we can better answer whether Blizzard deceptively advertised Warcraft 3 Reforged. This will be on the more concise side, unlike my article, which takes a more thorough look at the law and analyzes it in relation to video games as a product. If you want to dig further into the law, you can read my article. And if you don't want to deal with reading a long law review article and prefer something easier to digest, like a video, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment suggesting I make a video edition of my article. Also, I'd be very grateful if you share this video as well. First, here are the elements for deception as defined by the Federal Trade Commission. The three elements for deceptive trade practices are that 1. There must be a representation, omission, or practice that misleads or is likely to mislead consumers. 2. The act or practice must be considered from the perspective of the reasonable consumer. And 3. The representation, omission, or practice must be material. So, to put it very simply, deception has three elements. 1. A company says something that misleads or would be likely to mislead consumers. 2. That something must be misleading from the perspective of a reasonable consumer. And 3. The misleading thing is something that affects a consumer's decision to buy the advertised product. By the way, for those of you living in the UK or the European Union, their elements are very similar. Now, you may be asking, where's the actual law for this? It starts with US federal law, known as the US Code. More specifically, Chapter 15, Section 45 of the US Code, part of the law known as the Federal Trade Commission Act, which prohibits unfair and deceptive trade practices and gives the Federal Trade Commission the authority to prevent and enforce against unfair and deceptive trade practices. If the Commission rules that a company has engaged in deceptive trade practices, the Commission can reach a settlement with the company to remedy the deception or order remedial action, which can be enforced in federal court. These remedies can include correcting advertising to not be deceptive, prohibiting future deceptive conduct by the company, issuing fines, and arranging compensation for consumers. Note that the FTCA only empowers the FTC and does not create a private cause of action, meaning you cannot sue against deceptive advertising under this law. On the bright side, you can submit a consumer complaint to the FTC, something I'll elaborate upon at the end of the video. If you would want to sue, you would need to do so under a similar state law, commonly known as Little FTC Acts. California has been the most popular place for deceptive trade practices lawsuits for video games. For example, lawsuits over Aliens Colonial Marines and Fallout 76 were filed in California federal court. In this current case with Blizzard and Warcraft Reforged, a lawsuit is practically out of the question. The reason is because that shortly after Reforged's controversial release, Blizzard allowed people to refund the game with little to no restrictions. This means that anyone who bought Reforged and didn't like what they saw didn't really suffer any financial damage. Most of those who made refund requests got their money back. Without any significant financial damage, there's no money to sue for, let alone enough to make the legal expenses worth it. If Blizzard refused to honor refund requests to most of the people who bought Reforged, then there would be good grounds for a lawsuit. Of course, this is not what happened. Back to the FTC, most of its rules can be found in the Federal Trade Commission Statement on Deception, which is publicly available on the FTC website. As established by the Supreme Court, federal courts will defer to the FTC for determining whether an act or practice is deceptive. The last thing I'm going to cover here are some particular nuances of the law that will be relevant to Blizzard's representations about Reforged. This is not everything about the law, but I think it's enough to help make my legal opinion easier to understand. With the first element, claims made by a company can be express or implied. Express claims are exactly what it says on the tin, as the TV trope goes. Say if Nintendo announces Super Smash Ultimate 2, Nintendo claims that Sora will be playable in the new Smash when it comes out. This would be an express claim. Either Sora is in the game or he isn't. Simple as that. Implied claims require some context to understand. This could be something like the Reforged cutscenes. We need context to understand what Blizzard means by Reforged. A tried and tested example is from a landmark deceptive trade practices case, Kraft vs. FTC. Back in the 1980s, Kraft advertised that their cheese slices had 5 ounces of milk, implying they had more calcium content than the competition, which wasn't particularly true. Therefore, the FTC and courts will examine the context, including but not limited to evaluating the entirety of a document or other medium where the claim is made and looking at the nature of it. Further, they can look at the overall net impression created by a company's statements to find a claim to be misleading. As for the second element, remember how I said that a claim needs to be misleading from the perspective of the reasonable consumer? Now that invokes the first year law student's nightmare word, reasonable. Because what is actually reasonable is never clear. It depends. Fortunately, some of the FTC rules help ground this word in reality. If a product is targeted to a particular audience, the reasonable consumer is a reasonable member of the target audience. Also, the FTC and courts will be more keen to find a claim misleading if the target audience consists of people who are more vulnerable, like children and the elderly. On the flip side, if the target audience is well educated or more knowledgeable, the FTC will take that into account, like if someone was selling mind controlling parasitic worms to helminthologists. The FTC would very much account for the acumen of the helminthologists because they are scientists who study parasitic worms. Additionally, whenever a claim conveys two or more meanings to reasonable consumers, only one of the meanings needs to be misleading in order to find the claim deceptive. Here's another thing that's very important to know about the FTC rules. Consumers' reactions or interpretations to a claim can be reasonable even if it is not shared by a majority of consumers in the relevant class or by particularly sophisticated consumers. So, the FTC only needs to determine that a significant minority of relevant reasonable customers were likely to be materially misled to find deception. So this means a majority of people don't always need to reasonably fall for misleading stuff for it to be deceptive advertising. One more thing to mention in this element concerns disclaimers and disclosures. The FTC states that written disclosures may be insufficient in correcting a misleading claim, particularly when customers are directed away from what they call qualifying limitations in the text, or are advised that reading the disclosures are unnecessary. Further, the FTC generally sees that oral disclosures or fine print is insufficient to remedy the misleading effects of headlines or prominent written representations. Finally, a deceptive act or practice cannot be remedied by subsequent truthful disclosures. So a "don't hurt us, we're telling the truth now" defense won't work. The last snippets of law I want to mention concern the third and final element, materiality. The FTC can presume materiality, but will always consider relevant and competent evidence offered to rebut presumptions of materiality. Express claims are presumed to be material. Intent is not a requirement in a deceptive trade practice analysis. It doesn't matter if someone meant to be deceptive or not. However, an implied claim will be presumed to be material if it can be shown that a company intended that consumers draw a particular conclusion from a claim. Going back to that Kraft example, one of the reasons that the FTC presumed materiality was that Kraft intended that consumers conclude that Kraft cheese has more bone building juice. Claims will also be presumed to be material when a company knows that the claims they're making are false. With all those facets of the law in mind, it's now time to determine whether Warcraft Reforged was deceptively advertised. If there was an FTC investigation of Blizzard's advertising for Reforged, it would likely focus on the website where consumers can purchase the game and where the most recent claims have been published. So, for the particular claims made on the official website, those will serve as the particular claims that will be analyzed. The claims made on the website are the ones about the hero skins. 4+ hours of reforged in-game cutscenes, and updated UI. The official Warcraft 3 website simply promotes an updated UI. This is an implied claim because we need context to figure out what Blizzard means here. There are 4 interpretations of updated UI that I can think of for Reforged. Either 1, the new menu UI, 2, the remastered classic UI, 3, the new UI that was shown at BlizzCon 2018, or 4, the quality of life improvements to the in-game UI, such as team-colored health bars and improved ability and spell cooldown counters. Remember that when consumers draw several meanings from a claim, only one of them needs to be deceptive to find the claim deceptive. Here, the only potentially deceptive one is number 3, the new UI shown at BlizzCon 2018. This is most likely misleading, as the new UI is nowhere to be found since release. The only disclaimer that could be raised was Back to Warcraft reporting that the new UI would not be present at launch. However, the FTC could find that a significant number of consumers were not aware of the disclaimer because they did not see or hear of the Back to Warcraft report. The Commission could also consider that Blizzard made no effort to notify those who already pre-ordered Reforged of this update. By the way, I couldn't find anything suggesting that people were emailed by Blizzard regarding disclaimers about UI or other features. To those of you who are watching this video and pre-ordered Reforged, please let me know if Blizzard did in fact reach out to you with updates on Reforged features. I'd really appreciate it. The UI claim would most likely be material following one of 2 avenues. The first is that the new UI claim is considered on its own and is construed as an express claim. Either the new UI is there, or it's not. The other way is if the new UI is found to be one of the reasonable interpretations of the updated UI claim. The claim to retcon parts of the Warcraft 3 campaign to better align with World of Warcraft is not deceptive. Blizzard effectively disclaimed its retcon plans at BlizzCon 2019, and with the few things that it still decided to retcon, mainly layout and design of cities featured in both Warcraft 3 and World of Warcraft, were delivered on. The cinematic claim is also not deceptive. The remade cinematic from BlizzCon 2018 appears in the game, and the rest of the cutscenes are 1080p versions, as stated at BlizzCon 2019. The Reforged cutscene claim is misleading. This is an implied claim where video provides context and gives consumers an impression of what Blizzard means by Reforged cutscenes. Blizzard's disclaimers about the cutscenes are probably insufficient, especially when noting that one of the disclaimers made about dialing it back a bit on the style of the BlizzCon 2018 cutscenes was made at an event that was intended to be exclusive to BlizzCon ticket holders. The similar disclaimer made at the Back to Warcraft interview is more likely to be fair game, although there is a strong argument that providing a disclaimer along this avenue was insufficient, especially since it was oral. Also, there is nothing to indicate that Blizzard notified those who pre-ordered the game. Even if the disclaimer is good enough to make the cutscene claim not misleading, Blizzard continued to use BlizzCon 2018 material to promote the cutscenes even after Reforged was released. Again, the advertised cutscene from the culling did not appear in the game, being replaced by an arguably different and less impressive one. Because the culling campaign trailer stayed on the website shortly after release and was positioned in the way that gave consumers an impression of what the Reforged cutscenes would be like, the FTC could imply materiality on the basis that Blizzard intended that consumers conclude the rest of the cutscenes have similar production value and that the advertised culling cutscene would appear as advertised. The Commission could also imply materiality by finding that Blizzard kept the culling campaign trailer up knowing it was now outright false. If materiality cannot be found through either route, there is likely sufficient evidence that the Reforged cutscenes were material to many a consumer's decision to buy Reforged. In light of all this, the Reforged cutscene claim should be deceptive. The hero skins claims are misleading. Blizzard stated on several instances that various heroes from the campaign would appear as hero skins in multiplayer and single-player Melee games. As discussed earlier, while there are 6 other hero skins, the promised skins have not been delivered. Based on Blizzard's statements, consumers could have reasonably expected the hero skins to be available with the release of Reforged. There were no statements to the contrary. As for materiality, it could be presumed as the addition of the hero skins described by Blizzard is most likely an express claim. Blizzard could potentially rebut this presumption by presenting evidence that shows that consumers were much more interested in the other aspects of Reforged. Also, if the FTC found the claim to be implied instead, there may be insufficient evidence to show that it is material. Regardless, the hero skins claims are more likely to be deceptive. They were promised to be available in Melee games, but they are not. At least, not at the time of this video's making. I am putting Ladder in a separate category for this analysis because at BlizzCon 2019, Blizzard gave disclaimers that Ladder would not be live at launch. Disclaimers like this were not given for the other existing multiplayer and competitive features. Whether this claim is misleading rests upon whether Blizzard's disclaimers were adequate. A major factor that will hurt this adequacy is the fact that the BlizzCon 2019 deep dive was intended to be exclusive to BlizzCon ticket holders. The FTC would probably view this like it does for companies that hide disclaimers in the fine print or turn consumers' attention away from the disclaimers. After Ladder, the main misrepresented features here are profiles, clans, and automated tournaments. The claim that these features would be preserved or merged with other features in Reforged is misleading. Blizzard acknowledging these missing features and stating that it is working on developing and delivering these features is ineffective as a subsequent truthful disclosure. This claim may be implied instead of express because of Blizzard saying that it would merge certain features requires further information to understand what merging would mean. If it is determined to be implied, it may not be material unless sufficient evidence is introduced to show that enjoying legacy multiplayer features was significant in consumers' decisions to buy Reforged. Although single player was finally re-enabled 3 months after release, this omission is misleading, at least during those 3 months. Consumers would reasonably expect that major Warcraft 3 features, like single player, would be present in Reforged. Materiality could be presumed on the basis that Blizzard had known, or should have known, that consumers would need to know about changes to single player to make an informed purchasing decision. This omission would likely be deceptive, as Blizzard would be hard-pressed to rebut this presumption of materiality. For the same reasons I covered with single player, this omission would likely also be deceptive. Custom campaigns are not an exception to important features of Warcraft 3. Also, Blizzard after the fact saying that it is working on delivering custom campaign functionality is somewhat irrelevant here. If you're still watching. So, did Blizzard engage in deceptive advertising? Under the analysis I just made, yes. There are several claims and omissions that are most likely deceptive. In my legal opinion, if the FTC did investigate Blizzard and issue a ruling, I believe it's very likely that the Commission would at least find the cutscene claim to be deceptive. For those of you who will read my article, or watch a video on it, if I make it, you may be wondering, why am I not applying the materiality test that I propose in my paper here? To keep it brief, the reason is that the analysis I already made about Reforged speaks for itself and makes my test unnecessary. I say this in light of the sheer amount of representations that are most likely deceptive and how important those represented features are to the remaster. Another reason is that Reforged is that. It's just a remaster. The scope of the promised features is much more narrow compared to a whole new game. Blizzard was not selling Warcraft 3 itself, only the promised improvements that Reforged would bring. In my article, I reviewed No Man's Sky for deceptive advertising. There, it was more akin to Death by a Thousand Cuts, because it was a brand new game packed with features of varying importance from A to Z. In other words, the individual promised features of Reforged were each more important in swaying customers to buy the product. Before I conclude the video, I want to talk about what you can do now about Blizzard's potentially deceptive advertising, and what you can do when you see something similar from any company in the future. On the FTC's website, ftc.gov, you can file a consumer complaint. The FTC handles a wide variety of consumer issues, ranging from scams, identity theft, antitrust cases, and unfair and deceptive trade practices. The button to file a complaint is right on the front page. This leads you to the site where you can submit a complaint, ftccomplaintassistant.gov. Just select the category that applies to what you're complaining about. Personally, I would select internet services, online shopping, and computers when it's about video games. Then, you just fill in the information and submit the complaint. By the way, state governments have agencies and departments that deal with consumer protection issues like the FTC does. For those of you living outside of the United States, chances are that your government has at least one entity that is responsible for addressing consumer protection issues. Examples include the British Advertising Standards Authority, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, and the European Commission's implements for resolving consumer issues affecting citizens in EU member states. Thank you for watching my video about Warcraft Reforged, deceptive advertising, and you. I hope this video was informative and perhaps even enjoyable. Please like the video, comment, and subscribe if you would like to see videos directly or tangentially similar to this one. Bye bye.